Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mask Up virtual teach-in on COVID, bird flu, and mitigation of airborne diseases. Just quickly what we'll cover a variety of topics. We'll cover the 10 disability justice principles by Invalid, various masking practices, and we'll do like a bird flu 101 amongst so many other things.
We also wanted to extend the invitation to you all tomorrow, Saturday, February 8th at 4:30 p.m. Central Time for a creative writing activity called Love Letters from Outer Space. If you registered for this gathering today, you have already received a link, but it will also be in our stories, social media, Instagram specifically. A little bit about Love Letters from Outer Space. Love Letters from Outer Space is an ongoing body of work that archives journal entries, letters, and art from land stewards, artists, organizers, and the general public. It is set in a timeless world where our future kin wake up from a long slumber only to find themselves with our love letters that act as a compass to help them thrive in their world. This ongoing body of work creates a space that invites us to celebrate the liberated futures that are arriving, the people who made it happen, and the people who made it happen. During our time together, we will role build, dream, and create archival pieces for our future kin. Hope to see some of you there tomorrow. Touch a slide.
Okay, I have posted just in the chat now a copy of our slides, so it has our notes, which is our script on the slides, if it's easier to follow. Okay, so community agreements. During this teach-in, we aim to create a safe space for everyone. Cameras, mics, and typing in chat are not a requirement. If you can do it, all you can do is be present, even if it's just for a few minutes. We welcome you. This is a space where we respect people's sexual orientation and identities. Everyone here comes from different lives, and every life deserves respect. Hate speech will not be tolerated. If you see something, say something. It's up to the collective to learn and grow. Participants are encouraged to practice calling each other in the group to create and maintain respectful group dynamics. When we know better, we do better. Whether this is your first or 10th step in learning about airborne disease mitigation, we welcome you, and we hope that this teach-in is a mere stepping stone in your larger journey of learning. We want to make space to honor ancestors, elders, and people who inform our work, and recognize that this work and practices would not be possible without them. Our aim for this teach-in is to create a collective space for learning and education. We hope that you will learn new things or cement current knowledge. Questions, comments, and concerns will occur at the end, though we encourage conversations in chat. Our lovely chat moderators, Jem and Phoebe, will also be collecting questions throughout that we will address at the end. On that note, if you could keep your microphones off during the presentation, that would be great. And also, we will have a few breaks throughout. Now, introduction.
Yeah, hello, my name is B. I'm in so-called Chicago. I use they, them pronouns. Yeah, I'm a queer generational farmer, a seed keeper, artist, COVID realist from so-called Chicago, whose roots connect them to the hills of northern Mexico. From teaching art and ecology with youth to leading bird flu workshops for land stewards, some of my practices hope to create spaces where we can dream and create autonomous worlds. And this picture on the far right with my hand, that's some watermelon seeds that from a plant or from a fruit that me and my grandma ate together. And the collage on the far left is me when I was a child. I made that collage for my birthday a couple years ago. Hello, Chicago. In the chat. Hell yeah. All right, chat slide.
Hello all, my name is Eddie, my pronouns are they, them. I'm a white non-binary person, I have short brown hair, they're currently up in a bun, and I have roundish black glasses. I'm a disabled creative, a student, a mask advocate, and a member of CSAC. I strive to fight against eugenics through an intersectional framework that understands the interconnectedness of all issues and systems of oppression. I'm a white non-binary settler coming to you from Turtle Island in so-called Canada. I live in a city that occupies the ancestral lands of the Adirondack, the Shinotan, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee peoples, and the treaty lands and territory of the Mississauga of the Credit. I recognize the importance of the dish with one spoon covenant to this land and offer my respects and gratitude to all the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island who have stewarded, loved, and defended this land for centuries. This land acknowledgement is only a part of my continuous efforts of decolonization and recognizing my privileged position as a white settler on these lands. Colonialism is bloody and ongoing, and is foundational to the creation of Canada. To this day, structural systems continue to exploit Indigenous peoples and those lands. Cha-cha slide.
Hey y'all. My name is Ayada Cryer. I go by Aya. I am an Afro-Indigenous organizer in New Orleans, also known as Bobancha, originally inhabited by the Chitimacha, the Atacapa, Caddo, Huma, Choctaw, Tunica, and Natchez tribes. In my day-to-day life, I am a climate justice organizer, an artist, a writer, CSAC founder, and also an organizer with my local mask block. Really honored and excited that this has grown into what it has and that we get to do events and talk about stuff that we're interested in. In organizing, it's been an honor to speak out against my home becoming a sacrifice zone in a city that's on the front lines of the climate crisis and in a state with industrial operations, including petrochemicals and oil and gas, that make Louisiana a global driver for climate change and create disproportionate cancer rates for many communities of color. These social determinants of health, coupled with unmitigated disease spread, create higher rates of health comorbidities. And I appreciate every person who's here and open to learning in order to take a more informed approach to public health, disability, and climate justice by masking and supporting masking. In case it's not clear, I included some of the text boxes here for stuff that I've spoken out against and organized about. And just to like show y'all a little bit about who I am. I recently spoke out against ICE, calling out the environmental oppression linked to forced migration because of US imperialism. I also spoke out against Trump's push for military action to target Venezuela's oil reserves. American gas companies and the US military are some of the largest polluters in the world. And Donald Trump has been expanding oil and gas operations across the entire country, greenlighting that, disrupting the lives of thousands and fueling the climate crisis. Just so y'all know, I don't mess with fascists. All right, cha-cha slide.
Dope, thank you. Now we want to introduce some of the principles that ground our work. These principles were created by racialized, queer, and disabled organizers. In addition, and in response to disability rights movement that often did not include a racial component to their practices. You can find these disability justice principles in the Since Invalid website. I'm gonna read the ones that are here in the slide, and then I'm gonna touch the slide to my comrades to read the next few slides. The first one is intersectionality. We do not live single issues. Audre Lorde, Ableism, coupled with white supremacy, supported by capitalism, underscored by heteropatriarchy, has rendered the vast majority of the world, quote unquote, invalid. Leadership of the most impacted. We are led by those who most know these systems. Aurora Levins Morales. Anti-capitalist politic. In an economy that sees land and humans as components of profit, we are anti-capitalist by the nature of having non-conforming bodies and minds. Commitment to cross-movement organizing. Shifting how social justice movements understand disability and contextualize ableism, disability justice lends itself to politics of alliance. Touch slash.
Recognizing wholeness. People have inherent worth outside of comorbidity, relations, and capitalist notions of productivity. Each person is full of history and life experience.
Sustainability. We pace ourselves individually and collectively to be sustained long term. Our embodied experiences guide us toward ongoing justice and liberation.
Interdependence. We meet each other's needs as we build towards liberation, knowing that state solutions inevitably extend into further control over lives.
Collective access. As brown, Black, and queer-bodied disabled people, we bring flexibility and creative nuance that go beyond able-bodied and minded normativity to be in community with each other.
Collective liberation. No body or mind can be left behind. Only moving forward together can we accomplish the revolution we require. Our facilitator B put a lot of labor and love into planning, developing materials, research, and creating amazing activities for tomorrow's call, Love Letters from Outer Space. Please take a moment, if you can, to help them stay housed and warm in this winter while they are between jobs by donating to help them reach their goal of $900 for rent and bill this month. We made this community education sliding scale because we believe that continuing to emphasize the health risks that are downplayed in society on a global level to the benefit of a few and the detriment of all is necessary. Because many of us who deal with the realities of navigating the pandemic in a social era where clean air is not reflected in healthcare and public health practices as a right for all, did not have handbooks for when pandemic denialism reared its head in our personal lives. Reflecting that denial will not stop ongoing mass disabling events and exposing the impacts of unmitigated disease spread. Today, we will take part in carrying the torch of our ancestors and disabled ancestors, building the advocacy that has helped begin to free many of us and that will help awaken others. Our group is peer and volunteer-led. We don't get paid to put the things we are interested in together, but one of our facilitators lost their job as we were planning this community education. We decided to help fundraise to help them get compensated for time and effort they put into gathering resources for us. Please contribute what you can or help amplify their mutual aid posts for them to reach their needed resources. During the breaks, we will also have this up, so if you can't get it now, if you are able to donate, whatever you can helps support. Thank you. Now we will start with section 1, which is terms and definitions.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, we're gonna open up the first few terms and definitions by defining what eugenics is and how is it relevant to Black and Indigenous people of color specifically. We're also gonna have some historical records of how eugenics has played out in Black and Indigenous communities of color as well. Touch a slide, please. Okay. So what is eugenics? Well, eugenics is a multifaceted pursuit of pseudoscience built on the fallacy of the superiority of the white race. But what is pseudoscience? Pseudoscience is calling myths science and following those beliefs as if they are true. This, this trend persists in everyday thought and practices and is relevant only because of its role in global oppression and pervasiveness in our everyday lives. For example, this COVID-19 pandemic has shown us how pervasive eugenics has been, particularly when talking about COVID denialism, that we will eventually talk about in the later slides. I also want to invite us to think of the deeply religious commitment of Christopher Columbus and how religion excused the Spanish conquering of land, culture, and the people who inhabit the lands prior to Columbus' arrival. The Doctrine of Discovery, signed by the Catholic Pope of that time, tells of this commitment. On the far left of this slide, we have a eugenics tree that we will talk about in a few slides. In the far right, we have a beheaded statue of Christopher Columbus during the movement to remove statues in the beginning of the pandemic in 2020 as a response to the death of George Floyd. Touch the slide, please. So this is the eugenics tree, and it was created for the second international exhibition of eugenics, which is also called Congresses, that occurred in September 22nd to October 22nd of 1921. The eugenics tree illustrates different subjects and methods used by eugenists themselves to develop what they believe was a righteous human being. The wide range of fields it covered included anything from psychiatry and mental testing, religion and politics, economics and statistics, as depicted at the roots of the tree. Yes, touch the slide, please. Columbus pedestal removed from Garden Park in Chicago, July 2020. As mentioned earlier, on the topic of eugenicists and Christopher Columbus, in July 2020, in so-called Chicago, community members protesting the death of George Floyd, demanding that the Columbus statue to be removed as it serves as a symbol of colonialism, eugenics, and amongst others. The statue was later removed after ongoing demands by the public. And now, surprisingly, this statue is still stored in the Chicago Park District, one of the Chicago Park District facilities. So it wasn't destroyed. It was just stored and archived in a Park District facility. Touch the slide, please. What is eugenics? So eugenic thought and practices are reinforced by some of these following things: social death and murder, white supremacy culture and perfectionism. Eugenics often experiments or has science that experiments on bodies, historically disproportionately on people of color. Is reinforced by disposability politics and necropolitics. Who decides who gets to be disposed, and necropolitics, the death-related politics, and autonomy over our own life and death. An everyday example of these reinforcements are only the sick and elderly are at risk of death or disablement from COVID-19, which we know and we will learn how this is a myth. Like we said, similar to Christopher Columbus, religious-like commitment to conquering, eugenics offer like a harmful commitment in the making of the perfect human beings, meaning that they will do anything by any means necessary to get their point across. Okay, touch the slide. In continuing, how is eugenics relevant to Black and Indigenous people of color? Touch the slide, please. Current fascist regimes are in the race of creating a myth-based science based on power over people, nation building, border intensification, and experimentation. Eugenics is a race of sorts for the domination of cultural exploitation, oftentimes uplifted by colonialism. And again, this domination, eugenicists and people who practice this will try to meet these needs by any means necessary. This can look like an attack on land or land grabs and erasing and removing folks who steward such land, or even delegitimizing them from such land that they have a birthright to. This attempt of erasure affects the way that disabled, Black, and Indigenous people of color self-govern, practice autonomy, and create liberated worlds. Eugenics also reinforces and worsens the impacts of racial poverty. And we will talk about the impact of specifically of like eugenics and public health within border towns, amongst other topics like in prisons and the different levels of masking practices that Ayara and Eddie will touch upon later sections as well. Touch the slide, please. Cool. So in the early 1900s, at the south of the US border, there has been an array of attempts from the US Department of Public Health that are highly in support of eugenic movements of nation building and border intensification. The black and white photograph at the middle of the slide shows a group of racialized Mexican migrants in line outside of a disinfection station, waiting to be deloused or inspected and sanitized for lice. The location is an international bridge dividing stolen US territory land and stolen Mexican land at the border town of El Paso. Yep, kerosene. The need to clean, quote unquote, clean Mexican migrants from the diseases they might or might not carry became a way of deeming if they were, quote unquote, fit to roam outside of border towns. This is well documented in a public health report from March 1917 that reads, as additional precaution to prevent the spread of typhus from border towns to other parts of the United States, no Mexicans of the laboring class are allowed to leave a border town by train until they and their baggage have been treated at this disinfecting plant. As mentioned in the chat, yes, cyanogen and kerosene, both toxic chemical compounds, were used to stop the spread of disease, sometimes used in material things and sometimes used as sprays in people's hair. It's important to note that these public health efforts were part of a worldwide emergent network of quarantine and health inspection that served as imperial defense. Touch slide. The next slide will be somebody being sprayed, FYI. We wanted to name eugenics and public health as two key factors in promoting racial poverty and exclusion, and hygiene or cleanliness as a measurement to deem Black and Indigenous people of color as unfit and therefore a threat to the expansion of the United States colonial project, particularly during the nation's first major wave of immigration between 1880 and 1920. In the image that we see here was from an Instagram page called Working Class History of a Mexican man being deloused with spray in his head. And oftentimes, this protocol was mandatory, meaning that even if you had lice or not, you still had to get sprayed in the facility. On January 28th of 1917, Carmelita Torres refused to take mandatory gasoline bath given to day laborers at the border. On this day, she was able to recruit other farm workers, other laborers to join with them. This caused chemical burns and other health complications in the future. And interestingly enough, like people didn't really know that they will have health impacts from this. People were just trying to cross the border for work or because they were part of the Braceros program, which was a program to recruit people from south of the border to work the land in the United States and be promised visas. I think this part of history is deeply understudied and definitely should be looked at when we're talking about the relationship between eugenics, public health, and border making. But also just shout out to Carmelita Torres, who refused to take the mandatory gasoline bath and recruited other day laborers to protest against it or neglect that when it was mandatory. Okay, check the slide. So now we're moving on to, let me just check the chat. Okay. Gonna define what are airborne diseases, what are zoonotic diseases, and how are they related. Next slide. So what are airborne diseases? Airborne diseases are diseases that transmit infectious pathogens through the air or airways. In the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a lack of consensus across scientific disciplines and stakeholders like politicians and governmental officials, amongst other corporations that were invested, around whether diseases, and specifically COVID-19, infected others via droplets versus aerosols, meaning folks were trying to figure out how COVID-19 spread and then figure out how to share that information to the public. Undoubtedly, we now understand that infectious respiratory pathogens like COVID-19 and even influenza can be transmitted via aerosols and therefore linger longer in the air due to size and gravity. Droplets are larger in size and often will land quickly on the surface. Aerosols, on the other hand, are smaller in size and will linger in the air up to hours and moving in the air more like smoke. Large droplets can be considered to be larger than 100 micrometers, and a SARS-CoV-2 virus can range from sizes 0.09 micrometers to 0.4 micrometers. That is relatively small and almost invisible to the eye. Gravity and other environmental factors will play a role in how long aerosols and how far infectious pathogens remain in the air. We have an image here on the far right of the slide of somebody speaking. So oftentimes when folks speak, we, excrete different types of droplets and aerosols, different sizes. Droplets land in the surface much faster than aerosols. And think about how smoke travels. Think about how pollen might travel in the air too. Here in so-called Chicago, we experience some of the wildfires from Canada. Though smoke can travel longer than aerosols. I think it does give us a good visualization of how aerosols or particles that are relatively small to the eye can travel in the air. Okay, touch us later. So what are zoonotic diseases? Zoonoses is infectious diseases that jump from animals to people. And reverse zoonosis is from people to animals. So again, zoonotic diseases or zoonosis is diseases that jump or transfer from animals to people. And reverse zoonosis are infectious diseases that transfer from people to animals. These diseases can transmit via vectors. For insects, vectors can be like insects, for example. And something to look for in vector-borne diseases can be things like I think it's called the Chaga disease, which is The vector that transfer that is something called the kissing bug. Foodborne illness, we will have an example of that in relationship to bird flu. We just spoke about airborne disease or airborne transmission, and also waterborne. Touch slide. Zoonotic and airborne diseases, how are they related? Eugenics dissenters are relationship with animals because of its desire, and it's an attack on land. Culturally, we understand our relationship with animals to be as important as our relationship to people. We are deeply interconnected with the living and in the non-living environment. We share airways with the environment around us, and an attack on disabled Black and Indigenous people of color is a eugenics attempt at disposing our relationship to us such airways and all the creatures that share the same resource, air. Animals and people have always shared air. The exchange of disease between species is one that needs to be considered in our awareness of airborne diseases, as 61% of viruses that have emerged in people have come from animals. Our understanding of airborne disease is also an understanding that we live, work, play, and or even exist amongst animals in many different types of environments and situations. These environments only become hazardous if not mitigated properly, which we will speak on shortly. Touch the slide, please. And pass the mic.
Hi, y'all. So I'm going to talk about various levels of masking practices. Yeah, and we can move on. Or I should say, cha-cha slide. Thank you so much to the gorgeous and beautiful Eddie. Sorry, I love you. Anyway, yeah, various levels of masking practice. We've got pro-mask here, and what's not on this page is anti-mask, because like no practice is, I guess, not a practice, but yeah, people who are anti-mask, that's somebody who's against masking. The opposite of that would be to be pro-mask, which is an umbrella term, which hopefully applies to everyone participating here today. It just means supportive of masking. It's someone who's pro-mask. They may not see the importance of or have the resources or support to practice masking yet. This sometimes includes folks who got long COVID without realizing COVID was still around due to the underwhelming response globally to rampant disease spread. This can include non-maskers, but does not include anti-maskers. So to depict this, I included an image of a woman with a surgical mask and some thumbs up because it's more about attitude than masking practice, but it can be people that mask. So yeah, I just want to note that on this tier, I've got somebody wearing a surgical mask as like an example of someone who's pro-mask, but surgical masks, and there's people say different things about how effective masks are, if they vary, like depending on the seal that you can get, but surgical masks are only effective for one-way masking. Like it protects other people around you from your germs, but it doesn't protect you from other folks' germs. And as we're continuing to learn more, it's just a good thing to note, especially in the climate of denialism, that like if you're trying to protect yourself, maybe up the quality of your masks, and there's ways to get free masks, as most folks here probably know. A step up from just being pro-mask includes COVID cautious. This is about somebody who is developing a masking practice for reducing risk of COVID infections or reinfections, but not necessarily to the extent of prevention, which takes a lot of knowledge that like the government hasn't been giving us over the past few years. Some of us just woke up sick with a virus that some people didn't even know was still going around, or that the risks and health complications are as severe as they truly are. Anyway, yeah, this being COVID cautious, it can include masking and testing to the best of your access and ability or level of awareness. It also includes people developing a masking practice as they continue to find more resources over time. Just want to note, without systematic government support for disease prevention and mitigation, we really don't start off perfect, but because we understand the risks, we match our understanding with effort. Even if you're like starting to learn some things on this call and you're like, dang, I want to do more, we all know that that's not gonna happen perfectly overnight, and we're not holding people to that. This is a space for learning. Okay, a step up from COVID. Cautious. Is COVID safe? This is a masking practice that focuses on coronavirus specifically as far as airborne disease prevention goes and protection goes, and using accurate tests to ensure safety from COVID when unmasking with others. It's maintaining a consistent, safe, and like disciplined masking practice. This is sometimes used interchangeably with the term zero COVID. And we've got a lovely little image of a man in a KN or an N95 mask and another individual in a high quality respirator. And yeah, folks that get to a point of like being COVID safe are usually folks who recognize at this point, like, oh, wearing a respirator like an N95 or a KN95 as opposed to a surgical mask or a cloth mask, those protect you and those around you from viruses like COVID, flu, and RSV, and different from like one-way protection. But yeah, um, there are more airborne diseases and threats to health through the air than just COVID. So what's a step up from COVID safe as far as masking practice? How do we make our masking practice more intersectional? We have the goal of airborne disease mitigation. Airborne disease mitigated, that's intersectional. It covers different bases for the need for masks. We'll get a little bit more into. It suggests a layered approach to address disease prevention and building accessibility. Its emphasis on collective safety over individual actions alone. This little image in the top right corner is from an event with Clean Air Club Chicago, and they've got their high quality masks. Everybody's wearing that two-way protection mask. KN95s are higher end. They also had filters. I just included like a cute little image. Cha-cha slide, cha-cha slide. Ooh. Eugenics and Social Death versus Airborne Disease Mitigation. Yeah, I want to talk about social death and disposability and necropolitics versus centering prevention and rejecting eugenic thought, rejecting preventable death as quote unquote natural. Cha-cha slide. Thank you so much. Love you. Sorry. Appreciate you so much. Anyway. In 2000, oh wait, so yeah, airborne disease mitigations versus everyday eugenics. What is everyday eugenics? How do we recognize these things? What do they look like? It looks like unmitigated disease spread in 2022 because of capitalist interests, not because of, informed decisions. Mask mandates lifted after airlines lobbied for the president to end mask mandates on flights. It makes sense that corporations maybe don't like travel bans and restrictions because it gets in the way of them making money. But that does unfortunately put profit over public health and like people. And we're seeing the devastating impacts of that decision playing out in real time. Public health in a pandemic gets limited to personal choice. Masking as a practice gets limited to personal choice over collective safety. People who show symptoms and asymptomatic folks spread disease unmitigated that leads to continued death and disablement. This is underscored by COVID denialism, which is reflected in actions on a day-to-day basis. Unmitigated disease spread also causes isolation for folks. What's most common for disabled, immunocompromised, and other folks valuing airborne disease mitigation is navigating ableism in the forms of conscious ableism, unconscious ableism, or systemic ableism. And I can give just a few examples of those things. An example of systemic ableism includes mask bans and restrictions on respirator use. This also, another example is Trump's attacks on healthcare benefits, disability benefits, and Social Security. Yeah, unconscious ableism examples, just like maybe spaces centering including able-bodied people to the exclusion of disabled people. Unconscious ableism can also include like COVID denialism. If people aren't aware of things, sometimes they act uninformed. Alrighty, cha-cha slide. Airborne disease mitigations versus eugenics in healthcare. So what does pandemic denialism, this term that we keep talking about, look like in healthcare settings? And what kinds of complications can that result in? It can look like medical gaslighting. If your doctor isn't aware of the health issue that's going on with you, they could kind of abuse their authority to be like, this is what's going on with you, but that puts people in the dark about their bodies and can lead to undiagnosed or underdiagnosed disabilities. It leads to undiagnosed long COVID or misdiagnosis. This can look like medical trauma. Yeah, pandemic denialism also is reflected with the high risk of infection during routine appointments and health emergencies. Yeah, it looks like preventable deaths and disablement happening instead of care. It looks like medical staff remaining at disproportionately higher risk of infections or reinfections. Yeah, and it results in newly disabled people living without benefits and incorrect treatment. And then I also wanted to touch on what airborne disease mitigation looks like in healthcare. So they're not like casually sharing air in this picture. Both folks at least are wearing one-way protective masks, which is cool. Airborne disease mitigation in healthcare takes an informed approach. It prevents unnecessary deaths. It protects staff and patients. And effective mitigations greatly reduce the negative health impacts on essential workers. Cha-cha slide. I'd like to talk about super spreaders, y'all. We're getting more into everyday eugenics. These are the places where people are not masking. Thus, these are the places where people are spreading disease. And sometimes news outlets, years into a pandemic, act like that's a surprise. This is a picture from the Democratic National Convention in 2024. And yeah, because of unmitigated disease spread, many large gatherings become super spreader events. I mean, even small gatherings can become super spreaders, and we can get into that in like 2 slides. But yeah, at the last Democratic National Convention in 2024, it became a super spreader afterwards because adequate mitigations were lacking. Yeah, this article said that COVID was a quote unquote surprise guest. But, you know, the protesters at the DNC outside opposing genocide in different ways, like it was not something that was lost on us, that taking mitigations in at a huge crowded gathering could prevent that gathering from being a super spreader. I'm really proud to say that at the march on the Democratic National Convention, which was the largest in history, tens of thousands of people marched in support of ending genocide in Chicago in 2024. Clean Air Chicago provided 20,000 masks for these marches. And you can see in the pictures that some of the folks were actually using them. And yeah, which is really cool because like, for one, they are like reinforcing that COVID can be spread outside, especially at large crowded gatherings. And the effort that they put into that is just so beautiful to me because I wound up going and I was really excited. I wasn't excited that not everybody was masking, but it's definitely it's definitely building towards disease prevention, and I'm in love with that. Anyway, super spreaders continued. Concerts worldwide have also become super spreaders. Oh, can we slide? Sorry. Thank you. Taylor Swift recently toured the entire globe. And it was so interesting to watch different articles with headlines from countries that she was touring at. Um, that those gatherings became super spreaders. People were talking about getting COVID or long COVID. I thought that this one was really interesting, especially having ME. But one person said going to Taylor's concert has meant losing my voice, losing my mental health, and well, my health in general. I'm more dead than alive, but I would go to the concert 1,000 more times. It feels like the wrong conclusion. But another fan that was from Madrid, another fan who's from Australia was saying, posted a TikTok of herself dressed up in her concert outfit and glam makeup. The video then cut straight to her holding a positive COVID-19 test kit in bed. And about COVID, she said, it's the souvenir from the Eras tour that no one is talking about. Encouraged people to mask after experiencing that. But yeah, cha-cha slide. Just to get a little deeper into super spreaders and what they are, in case folks are like, I kind of get what we're talking about, but I don't know what we're talking about. There's a super awesome article on super spreaders that I think breaks it down in a pretty good way. Super spreader events are dependent on several factors, including the environment where the event takes place, how contagious people are, and the kind of variant that they've been exposed to. We're talking about COVID. Super spreaders that come from family events often catch those infected off guard because they believe their family to be something of a safe, quote unquote, bubble. A, a guard, a close group of people they're around often, and people who've disclosed their COVID-19 vaccination status seem unlikely to cause an outbreak on the surface. But yeah, many don't quite fully comprehend the fullest, strictest bubble concept. Super spreader events can occur at home or in public places, including band rehearsals, choir practice, concerts, music festivals, crowded bars, clubs, or churches, birthday parties, baby showers, holiday get togethers, weddings, funerals, conferences, casinos, cruises, all kinds of fun stuff. Outdoor gatherings are safer than indoor gatherings, and indoor gatherings with windows open and an airflow going through are better than not. But you can still get infected, even at those events, if the right variables are in play. With that in mind, social gatherings and public outings have higher potential to become super spreader events if they occur indoors or in enclosed spaces where multiple people are in close proximity to each other. If they provide poor ventilation with limited fresh air, or if they involve lots of talking, yelling, or singing, and lack mitigations. Like if you can mask for all of these things, everyone can mask for all of these things, and somehow it's no longer a super spreader event. And that's what we saw happening during mask mandates when these concerts had to have mitigations and were less often becoming super spreaders versus now, where we keep seeing trends like with Mother Taylor Swift, as we will refer to her. I'm so sorry. Anyway, yes. Next slide. Next slide. Cha slide. Cha slide. Oh, yeah, this is the Democratic National Convention. I think I went out of order with my slides and I apologize, y'all. This was what I was talking about where Clean Air Club Chicago provided 20,000 masks for folks. And the folks that ended up showing, like, which is a lot of work to put into sourcing masks. And the folks that showed up exceeded that amount. And that's wonderful on so many levels to see so many people who are anti-genocide and also to see a lot of those people be pro-mask. Cha slide. Okay, y'all, we're still in everyday eugenics. We are not quite to airborne disease mitigated, but we're looking at things that are building disease prevention measures at this point. And I want to talk about this masks provided thing. One example that we have of masks provided is staff at one coffee shop in the US all mask on shift to help protect their immunocompromised coworker. This little sign up here reads, "Attention, we have immunocompromised staff. Please wear a mask if you are feeling sick. They are located on the podium by the front door. We thank you for caring about our health." I'd just like to note that the suggestion that only wearing a mask when you are feeling sick helps protect others, or yeah, that only wearing a mask to help protect others' health when you're feeling sick overlooks asymptomatic disease spread. And I mean, another thing about immunocompromised patients, they're at high risk of long-term negative health impacts from coronavirus and higher risk of death from like singular infection. So if you really want to protect your immunocompromised friend, patient, coworker, or whatever, you don't just want a mask like if you think you might spread something, because the fact of the matter is you could spread airborne disease, including COVID, having zero symptoms. So masking proactively is like the best way for you to avoid or to actually help protect the people around you and yourself. All right, cha-cha slide. Alrighty, y'all. Any of y'all familiar with this diagram? The Swiss cheese model? No? Maybe? Yes? Okay. Airborne disease mitigation. We finally reached it. What does it look like? It's layered. We keep talking about that. What does that mean? Okay, so an example I wanted to include is a Swiss cheese model, which includes multiple layers of protective measures to improve success and protection from and prevention of infections. The Swiss cheese respiratory pandemic defense recognizes that no single intervention is perfect at preventing the spread of the coronavirus. Each intervention or layer has holes, like Swiss cheese. Anyway, personal practices for pandemic defense include staying home if you're sick, using respirator masks, hand hygiene, and cough etiquette is another layer. Avoiding touching your face is another layer. Limiting your time in crowded spaces can help reduce your risk. And shared responsibilities include fast and sensitive testing and tracking, air filtration, or ventilation. Gathering outdoors can be a layer that helps prevent disease spread. Government messaging and financial support is one shared responsibility regarding disease prevention. Quarantine and isolation helps us protect each other too, as well as vaccines as another layer. Yeah, all of those things together can help protect you from airborne disease spread. Like you can see through all of these different layers of the cheese. This beautiful masked person on the right here is not being touched by these these little aerosols or droplets, whatever they are, trying to get through the cheese holes. Sorry, y'all. Okay, that was not scripted. I'm gonna move on. Cha-cha slide. Ooh, I love these. Okay. Airborne disease mitigation versus eugenics. And we're still in airborne disease mitigated. What does it look like? We've got Chicago organizers on the left. This example is from Chicago against racist and political repression. They're fighting back against crackdowns on protesters by the Trump administration. And in their office, they require masks. This is in the heart of the Black community in the south side of Chicago during a surge in COVID cases. And I just love that image. They've got like little signs up in the office about protecting each other, making sure that you're masking if you're in the space. and not disabling other organizers so that they can really focus on the work that they're doing. And I love how well people there, somebody is considering public health. Anyway, another example of an airborne disease mitigated gathering is an event that was hosted by the Chicago Clean Air Club that requires masks and uses air filters to clean the air. You can see the little air filter on the ground in front of the crowd. You can see everybody in their high quality masks. I want to note that not all of the events that Clean Air Club promotes or attends are masks required or all use high quality masks. So if you see mixed things, like just keep in mind that folks are still building their like practices, and a lot of mask groups are trying to be like entry points for folks, knowing that, you know, there was no handbook for this basically. But yeah. Despite another example of airborne disease mitigation is universal masking reinstatement. So despite the pervasive global culture of pandemic denialism, in some countries and counties, masking has been reinstated since mask mandates lifted in 2022. Sometimes this is just temporarily as quote unquote harm reduction during upticks in airborne disease spread, but prevention would be more effective at reducing deaths and disablement in an ongoing mass disabling event than being like, oh, look at these cases rising again. Okay, now let's protect people from this. Look at them rising again. Oh, now, like, it's different. We should have the preventive measures as at a baseline and stuff. Yes. Okay, that's it for me. Next slide. Oh, ciao, ciao slide.
Now we will have a 5-minute break. During this break, I will put up the information if people can amplify or donate to our lovely facilitator, Steve. Put a timer up. Okay, so our 5-minute timer is up. Just waiting to see if our comrade B is ready for the start of our section.
Okay, but cool. Now we're gonna move into okay. Now we're gonna move into talking a little bit about what is COVID-19 or what is COVID. Next slide, please. So what is COVID? COVID-19 is caused by the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which is short for severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2. It's the lineage of the COVID-19 virus, or the COVID virus that we are currently experiencing, comes from MERS-CoV and SARS-CoV-1, and both have caused epidemics, but did not reach the level of harm COVID continues to induce in our everyday lives. COVID-19 is a multifaceted disease, particularly a vascular disease, affecting different parts and systems of the bodies. Getting infected can increase the risk of heart attack, stroke, and even death. There's also permanent and long-term multi-system damage that we will look and talk about in the next slide. Touch slide, please.
Okay. Can people see this yellow on the screen? Just before I get into it, I don't know how to remove that. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. Okay. There is a lot we do know about long COVID, with also so much more we don't. Here is a very quick, very brief look at what is long COVID. Most definitions of what long COVID is or who has long COVID are pretty vague. But to put it plainly, Dr. Al-Ali and Topol describe it as the constellation of post-acute and long-term health effects caused by the infection. To put it more broadly, long COVID can manifest in people across the lifespan, from children to older adults, across race, ethnicity, sex, and baseline health. It is a complex, non-monolithic, multi-system disease with sequelae across almost all organ systems. Long COVID is likely a disease with many subtypes that may have different risk factors, genetic, environmental, and distinct biologic mechanisms that may respond differently to treatment. This basically means that it impacts everyone very differently. Currently, there's over 200 recording symptoms across every organ in the body. This includes cognitive decline, memory problems, dysautonomia, weakening immune systems, heightened risk of heart attack, and so much more. Chances of long COVID and worsening long COVID symptoms increase with each infection. Long COVID research is super underfunded, and there is so much more we don't know, especially given rampant COVID denialism in the medical community. This is also why it's so important to listen to firsthand experiences of long COVID, and they're vital for us to recognize and amplify. Next, there's so many ways that COVID intersects and compounds with different systems. And while we'd love to touch on all of them, here are a few we chose to highlight. Palestine and COVID. Palestine and COVID. As we are nearing 77 years of Israel's current genocide of Palestine, it is important to highlight that to be pro-Palestinian is to be COVID safe. Israel is a settler colony, occupying Palestinian land with current hopes and efforts of colonizing all of Palestine and ethnically cleansing Palestinians. Therefore, letting COVID spread unmitigated is beneficial to Israel. Under Israeli apartheid, Palestinians live under heavy restrictions. In the West Bank, they have to pass through multiple checkpoints daily, and their movement is heavily surveilled. Gaza has been under total blockade for multiple years now. These violent structures make Palestinians uniquely susceptible to be less COVID safe or have less access to COVID safety. Palestinians have pointed out that restrictions we faced during lockdown were only a glimpse into what they faced under Israeli apartheid. In regards to COVID, Israeli officials repeatedly refused to distribute COVID-19 vaccines to Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. They went as far as to present Palestine as an autonomous state to absolve themselves of the responsibility of distributing vaccines and delivering COVID mitigation resources, despite the fact that Israel is continuously fighting to present Palestinian statehood. We can see that by 2021, when 53% of Israelis had been vaccinated, only 3% of Palestinians had received the first dose. Next, we'll look at genocide and healthcare. As Israel's genocidal campaign against Palestinians rages on, Palestinians are continuously displaced and forced into smaller and tighter quarters, surrounded by sewage and piles of trash, as Israel has destroyed all structures that safely dispose of trash and sewage. This has set up a perfect scene for rampant spread of infectious disease. Currently, COVID and influenza are running rampant across Gaza. As of January 30th, 2024, the Ministry of Health spokesperson has reported over 700,000 cases of infectious disease in shelters. These numbers are likely severely undercounted. Israel has deliberately destroyed hospitals and healthcare facilities, leaving Palestinians without access to their already limited systems in place to mitigate the spread of infectious disease. They have limited or no access to necessary vaccines, proper PPE such as masks or respirators, nor do they have access to clean water. Israel deliberately disables Palestinians, meaning the large part of Palestinian population are vulnerable to severe COVID infections. Not to mention, as Israel blocks food and aid, Gaza faces famine and hunger is immunocompromising. Next, how a free Palestine requires a fight against COVID. Ramona Escario and Shyam Gies say, like the genocide of Palestinians, the unmitigated spread of COVID-19 across our communities is a policy choice, not an inevitability. Viruses defy borders, and when we say we all share the same air, we too are not speaking in metaphor. We can draw direct chains of infection between us and Palestinians. Individuals with COVID travel to Israel to join the IOF, then directly infect Palestinians, which creates faster and larger chains of infection in Gaza and the West Bank. Palestinians deserve to have access to adequate health care, as well as resources to be COVID safe. They also deserve statehood and immediate end to the genocide, and that is only a start. In our fight to being COVID safe, we must fight for Palestine. Black abolitionist Estella Ellison says genocide cannot be fought by making peace with concurrent genocide when talking about Palestine and COVID. We have to reject mass death is normal. This isn't exclusive to Palestine. Sudan's medical system is in ruins, with populations consistently being displaced with little access to food or water because of the RSS genocidal campaign, as well as ongoing settler colonial projects. Large portions of the DRC populations are in under-equipped and hazardous temporary camps because of West tech companies such as Apple and Google exploiting its peoples and its land, and so much more. Make no mistake, ongoing colonialism is deadly, and colonizers will use any tools at their disposal to ensure they stay in power. Content warning for Indigenous death. Ramona Escayo says, pandemics are the tool of colonizers. Refuse to do the bloody work of the empire. The intentional spread of infectious disease to Black and Indigenous peoples has long been a tool of colonizers to continue their genocidal campaigns and land grabs. Israel's deliberate restrictions of COVID supplies to Palestinians being a recent example. This horrific practice can be seen across colonial history. Hudson Bay's blanket played a key role in spreading smallpox throughout Indigenous communities in so-called Canada, is another example that comes to mind. We can see this legacy too through government's response to Indigenous communities asking for medical equipment and mitigation tools. For example, when reserves in Manitoba, Canada were hit hardest by swine flu in the early 2000s, and when Indigenous communities asked for COVID testing, they were both met with body bags. Pandemics are the tools of colonizers, and we must not play a part in them. Our fight against colonialism is one in the same with our fight for COVID justice. Next, prisons and COVID. Content warning for self-injury. Prisons, jails, or carceral facilities place already marginalized individuals, most notably Black and Indigenous peoples, in high-risk and unsafe environments for infectious disease. In regards to COVID, carceral facilities' structural design make COVID mitigation relatively impossible. Tight quarters make social distancing challenging, facilities are heavily or overpopulated, and they all have very poor ventilation, all of which place incarcerated individuals at high risk of repeated COVID infections in an environment when they have no say. Not to mention the constant flow of people creates high risk of transmission in and outside of facilities. In fact, within the first year of the pandemic, COVID-19 case rates were as high as 3.3 times higher in England and Wales and 5 times higher in the US in incarcerated populations versus the general public. Carceral settings are designed to be a heavily isolating environment, but isolation was exacerbated when facilities had COVID restrictions in place, leading to higher rates of self-injury. Incarcerated individuals had less contact in person with loved ones and only had access to phones or virtual calls, all of which cost money. Next, the prison industrial complex. Robin Maynard writes in Policing Black Lives, so I know I've heard Corridors of Contagion is a great book, and it is on my list. Robin Maynard writes in Policing Black Lives, though incarceration itself is harmful, subjugating Black, Indigenous people, as well as people with mental health issues to solitary confinement, despite all human rights evidence and medical evidence imposing this practice, makes it clear that prison is a site of violence, not one of healing. With that, we turn to the prison industrial complex. It's defined by critical resistance. It is a term we use to describe the overlapping interests of government and industry that use surveillance, policing, and imprisonment as a solution to economic, social, and political problems. I bring these points up to show that the prison industrial complex directly impedes COVID safety and COVID justice, on top of a system that deliberately is designed to harm BIPOC. We can clearly see how little carceral facilities care for individuals when we see the response when demanded to lower incarcerated population rates in order to mitigate COVID-19. By the start of year 2 of the pandemic, state carceral facilities in the US were at 19 states carceral facilities were at 90% capacity or higher. The prison industrial complex thrives on incarcerating more and more people because more people equals more profit, whether that be through unpaid labor or ties to corporations. Abolishing prisons. How does abolishing prisons and COVID justice go hand in hand? Incarcerated individuals deserve COVID safety. They also deserve systems of community care and healing over repeated punishment. We cannot be COVID safe and not recognize the harm the prison industrial complex has against Black and Indigenous people, and that its design is meant to punish people for being racialized and or poor. We cannot fight eugenics without fighting the oppressive systems that are foundational to the prison industrial complex. We also must not neglect incarcerated individuals, as our society so often does when striving for a COVID-safe and anti-ableist world. If we separate ourselves from incarcerated individuals, from ourselves in this fight, how are we any better than a society that sees disabled people as disposable? Next, Cha-Cha slide 2B.
in addition to all the good stuff we've been saying, abolishing prisons is also a call to abolish ICE. Because when we abolish ICE and we abolish prisons, it's also a call to mitigate infectious airborne disease that infect us all. Similar to prisons, ICE detention centers creates opportunities for detainees to become ill from an array of infectious diseases like COVID-19, influenza, and measles. Detainees in detention centers are withheld from medical care. So there's definitely been reports of people who have been severely ill in ICE detention centers, but yeah, because of the lack of care, they have not received that care. And oftentimes there's been cases and reports too of people passing away due to not receiving the care they need. In other terms, ICE detention centers are hella disabling. And also, similar to prisons, ICE detention centers create excess deaths, meaning deaths that we wouldn't have otherwise if detention centers will cease to exist. As of recently, we're also seeing some outbreaks of measles, yes, in schools and in other everyday places in our lives, but also particularly in some of the detention centers around the United States. Touch a slide, please. So masking as collective care versus ICE agents. ICE agents and cops even use all types of different masks. Sometimes they wear gaiters, like this police person here with that greenish like mask or gaiter. And sometimes they use P100s. P100s can filter out toxic smokes or chemicals. And often they use P100s to quote unquote protect themselves from the same violence they incite or trigger. And often also they wear masks to hide their identity from public shaming, because we love when people public shame ICE agents and cops. The further use of masks or face coverings by ICE agents and cops alike further criminalizes mask wearing. Yeah, often when I scroll through TikTok, the language that is being used to describe people that wear masks, even if they're wearing masks just to protect themselves, is often deeply alienating, and it's not informed by collective care or disease mitigation. Lastly, masking as collective care, and most of us, or hope all of us here, airborne disease informed folks wear respirators for public health or for our own or collective reasons of taking care of each other. We might be taking care of ourselves. We don't want to get ill again or be part of the mass disabling that's happening outside of our community, amongst other reasons. I think this topic in particularly is going to be particularly more important, I think, and more narratives are going to be built around this, specifically as we continue to see the rise of ICE detention centers in the United States. I wish we continue to see the rise of different types of pandemics, for example, like the ongoing 19 pandemic, and the narratives that come around why people wear respirators or don't. Touch slide.
Your turn on.
Hey, y'all. I'm going to talk a little bit about COVID and climate justice. And I'll try to get through it quickly because I took so much time earlier. I feel like we're gotta get through this. Yeah, so air pollution exposure exacerbates coronavirus symptoms. Um, Environmental racism creates disproportionate health risks for Black and Brown communities. And frontline communities in the climate crisis bear the brunt of devastating storms, wildfires, and crop failure, which we need masks for. While the government and other institutions' policies on masking are inconsistent, mask blocks have been helping to provide free, high quality masks to guard public health and climate disaster response efforts. Yeah, we knew. Oh, there was an article in the Six Times. One example is the 2025 LA wildfires. Um, yeah, an organizer from the LA Mask Block named Abby Mailer says, "We knew it had to happen from us. There was no one else doing it, no one to call about providing masks during the wildfires and huge amounts of smoke. From those, Abby also said, we deserve to breathe clean air. That is not being provided to us by the government that we pay for." A little fun fact about the LA wildfires. Our president blamed it on uh, a species of fish in the state of California, and also blamed it on the governor of California not managing the forests well. But science actually proves that those fires didn't have to do with land management or species of fish. And our president is a climate change denialist, and this is example that like those are examples of climate change denialism, like that kind of thought in real time, that kind of propaganda in real time. And it's interesting because what what some articles have actually shared and what different scientists have shared is that the LA wildfires last year were partly fueled by oil and gas operations, and major pollution is exacerbating the climate crisis, like causing these things. Another fun fact, a lot of US oil and gas companies are folks who contributed to Trump's campaign. Those are the capitalist interests, some of them that are in his pocket or the other way around. Anyway, cha-cha slide. Oh, actually, no, we can go back. There are other things besides wildfires. There are various reasons for the need for masking. Oh, various reasons for the need for masking. And it includes smoke from wildfires out here in Louisiana, which is so much wetlands, that has expanded to marsh fires. Yeah, it's mass our layer of disease prevention. We've been talking about that. Primarily, it also helps to protect folks from air pollution, from dust and allergens, some stuff like that. Okay, cha-cha slide. Thank you, Betty. Thank you so much. You're amazing. I want to talk a little bit about how COVID disproportionately impacts BIPOC. COVID hit Indigenous and Black communities hardest during lockdown, and like some of the negative impacts from COVID-19 on communities of color are compounded by factors like environmental racism, like we were talking about, air pollution or sacrifice zones. And that means like where polluters create higher rates of cancer and are near communities of color. Exposure to air pollution can cause similar issues from industrialization in our nearby communities of color. There's the racial wealth gap, racial poverty. And those things can be like reinforced by things like redlining, which will keep people in areas that become high risk for their health. Inequities in healthcare, medical racism or discrimination in healthcare, and other social determinants of health. These create comorbidities that increase the risk of long-term health issues with COVID-19 in communities of color. So yeah, if you got cancer from the folks playing with carcinogens at industrial plants next to the city that you live in, then definitely at greater risk of severe health issues from a disease like coronavirus. Right, a slide. Global scale of masking advocacy, varied responses in different countries, and global prevalence of long COVID. Masking advocacy is ongoing in different countries worldwide. This isn't an exhaustive list, which is so exciting. Yeah, masking advocacy is happening in France, it's happening in Canada, it's happening in Germany, it's happening here in the US, it's happening in Mexico, it's happening in India, Australia. The list goes on. The little example that we have here is literally from yesterday. And this is in Mexico. Masks in schools are mandated as measles outbreak prompts health alert in the World Cup host. Jalisco, Mexico. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly, and I apologize. But yeah, in the US, responses to the coronavirus have varied, with mask reinstatements introduced at different levels of government and across different institutions like universities, hospitals, businesses, transportation, etc. And sometimes reinstatements are temporary. In 2025, long COVID research was defunded in the US. This is just another example of varied responses and understandings of COVID and why. Millions were allocated, well, at the same time, millions were allocated to funding long COVID research in late 2025 in Germany. So here, they're keeping us in the dark, but over there, there are different countries that are taking initiative as we're seeing, okay, there's more to this virus than we know, and we need to pay attention to that in order to help protect people. The last thing I wanted to mention is that the World Health Organization still declares COVID-19 as a global pandemic, never declassified the coronavirus as a pandemic. But I mean, I also would like to note, as far as varying responses, that the US is continuing to break away from the science around COVID. The Trump administration initiated a US exit from the World Health Organization just this year, like last month. So that's exciting. Cha-cha slide.
Now we're going to touch on some myth busting for COVID.
Awesome. The first myth, sorry. Oh yeah, I'm muted. Cool. The first myth that we have here says, have people ever heard of people say the more you get sick, the more the body builds immunity to diseases, and specifically airborne diseases? That is a myth. And the truth is that the ongoing prevalence of the COVID pandemic says otherwise. If it were the case that our body builds immunity, then we will not be seeing the rampant spread of COVID-19. And we are also now seeing the effects of repeated COVID infections within peoples who do not mitigate such disease. Blah, blah, blah. And it's also true that there is asymptomatic effects when somebody becomes infected with COVID-19 that will also, you don't have to show visible signs that you are quote unquote ill from COVID-19 to experience the long-term onset effects of COVID. There's also, in addition, the rise of flu infections proved the CDC wrong in 2024, who believed immunity depth will cause less flu outbreaks in the years to come. We do not have a certain threshold that we need to surpass in order for our immune systems to reset. This is an ableist belief deeply rooted in eugenics thought. The ongoing escalation of flu hospitalizations may be also attributed to repeated exposure of COVID, for example. The reality is that our immune system is a finite resource and cannot be trained to become healthier. Touch slide, please.
Next, vaccines stop the transmission of COVID. Fact. There is no empirical evidence that proves that COVID vaccines stop the transmission of COVID. This does not mean that vaccines do not serve a purpose. COVID vaccines help reduce individual symptoms, severe disease, resulting in reduced hospitalization and ICU admissions. In that sense, vaccines, as Aya mentioned earlier, should not replace other forms of mitigation, but instead be part of a layered mitigation approach. Next, COVID cannot travel more than 6 feet. COVID can, in fact, travel more than 6 feet. The World Health Organization, or WHO, I'm going to say WHO, guideline for COVID social distancing is at least 1 meter or 3 feet. This myth originally stems from a 1913 study of airborne droplets, specifically for tuberculosis, that concluded that droplets on average travel 3 feet. This is all under the assumption that COVID primarily travels through droplets, which is false. The 6-foot guideline did not come into effect until the SARS pandemic, with a study of exposure of SARS on aircraft concluding that 6 feet or 2 meters was a safe social distancing length. With technology that now allows us to see submicron aerosols, we know that these distances are not enough. Studies have found that intense coughing or sneezing can result in COVID traveling more than 20 feet indoors, with large droplets averaging around 8 feet. Furthermore, SARS-CoV-2 can remain airborne indoors for hours and accumulate over time. Specifically, the quote, as a comparison, calculations predict that in still air, 100 micrometer droplets will settle on the ground on around 8 feet in 4.1 seconds, whereas 1 micrometer aerosol particle will take up to 12.4 hours to settle on the ground. This is why masking, as well as proper circulation and air filtration, ventilation, is needed. Though you may be slightly safer outdoors, SARS-CoV-2 aerosols can travel like smoke. So think of how far you can smell someone smoking outside. This is why when there are social gatherings outdoors, it's still important to mask. Next myth, kids cannot get COVID. Fact. Anyone, and I mean anyone, including kids, can get COVID. BIPOC are at higher risk of infection because of oppressive structural systems that we've mentioned earlier. This harmful narrative stems from early hospitalization data from 2019 and 2020 in China that reported children having the lowest or almost negligible demographic admitted to hospitals. The reason for lower hospitalization rates is because kids have been shown to have milder cases of COVID. While reasons for why this isn't crystal clear, a 2023 study found a possible reason for milder cases of COVID to be the difference in how children and adult antibodies respond. The finding suggests that the cytokine protein, the proteins that are part of our immune response, specifically found when we're talking about, this was a study in the nose, snuffed out SARS-CoV-2 infections right at the site of where the virus enters, in case the nose. Children's bodies potentially, snuffed out SARS-CoV-2 infections right at the site of infection, where the virus entered the children's bodies, potentially explaining the mildness of COVID-19 disease. This dangerous myth and narrative have put children in the direct line of fire for repeated COVID infections and lowered precautions. In fact, COVID surpassed asthma as the leading chronic condition among kids in the US, and that happened in only 5 years. I'd mentioned earlier in the chat, but I believe protecting kids is a community effort, and we have to protect kids by masking and mitigating COVID and other infectious diseases so that their parents or guardians who don't protect them, we can protect them as much as we can. Now we're going to have another 5-minute break. I will put B's info again on the slide. Thank you again for all of the participation in chat. It's really lovely to see how many people, like all the information y'all are bringing and just like the engaging conversations y'all are having. So I thank y'all so much.
I was trying to yap. I'm just kidding. But no, I'm not. I'm genuinely curious. But yeah, somebody says in the chat, hope there will be an opportunity to get more involved with your collectives. I'd like to find more ways to bring this info to my school for kids, families, and staff. Something that we've been talking about planning. And this is like a peer-led, volunteer basis type group. So it really is like the main goal is for us to prop up folks like self-expression, COVID safe and pro-mask people's expression, and have a safe, like a space for folks to do that. The group is anti-capitalist. We don't even we're not pressuring people. We're not like, yeah, get on this call. Look, dude, you need to write 10 pages every day. Like, we need to get this propaganda out there. I'm just kidding now. It's super casual. Sometimes people don't even do art. It's also social. Yeah, sometimes people are just bedbound and isolated. And we're talking about why that isolation is so prevalent. It is one of the material consequences of eugenics. It's a consequence of a lack of mitigation, basically. Yeah.
I just want to echo what I was saying. We are a collective that meets weekly on Sundays. So tomorrow, when we have Love Letters from Outer Space, that is the usual CSAC time. So if y'all want to join, we would absolutely love to have more people. And yeah, in the chat, how many of y'all have, I guess, one, heard about bird flu, and two, what would you gauge your knowledge of bird flu to be? Just because I think maybe a lot of us are coming from maybe more COVID spaces and have more knowledge about COVID, but less about bird flu. So yeah, I'm just genuine. You don't have to respond, but I'm just curious about what people's, I guess, level is about how much knowledge they know about it.
What are you laughing about? What was that?
Sorry, Matthew said compared to my doctors, I'm an expert.
Real talk. Real talk.
Be ready whenever you are. Sorry, thank you for letting me just ask the question. But it seems we have some knowledge, but mostly beginners. So this is exciting.
Yeah. Bird flu, charge slide to the next slide, please. Yeah, also somebody who particularly became interested in bird flu because of my relationship to the land and land stewardship. And my first connection to bird flu in an organization space was last year with an org called Advocates for Agriculture, where the idea was to distribute full PPE to different land stewards in Chicago, and then make something similar like today, like a workshop for land stewards, which we'll probably, I don't organize with AUA anymore, but we'll probably still do a bird flu for land stewards in the near future. But yeah, so this section is gonna be about bird flu and some influenza A viruses And with that, we will start to select to the next slide. Oh yeah. Also, yeah, what is bird flu? It will cover where and how does it spread, and some suggested monitoring and protocols. Touch a slide. So what is bird flu? Bird flu or avian influenza refers to the infection caused by influenza type A viruses, particularly H5 and H7 subtypes. We'll have diagrams in the next slide to just show a little bit more specifics. Meaning that there's different subtypes under influenza A viruses that cause illness amongst animals and also amongst people. Highly pathogenic avian influenza, HPAI, is a viral zoonotic disease that is increasingly infecting farmed animals, dairy cows, and wild birds. Poultry like chickens, ducks, and geese, for example, are at risk of experiencing HPAI. Touch a slide, please. This chart notes influenza types A, B, C, and D viruses. And it knows that influenza viruses can infect animals and people alike. Influenza A viruses can infect a wide range of communities, including avian creatures or birds, swines, or domesticated wild boar relatives, for example, and people. Noting that avian-like influenza can be found in H5 and H7 subtypes that we can see in the middle diagram here under A subtypes. While bird reservoirs can host both highly pathogenic avian influenza and low pathogenic avian influenza, for example, ducks and geese can carry and shed certain highly pathogenic avian influenza viruses without showing any visible signs and symptoms of being affected. Both HPAI and LPAI live undoubtedly amongst a good amount of the bird population and is a major potential source of infection for domestic animals. So often, for example, in a poultry farm where there's like thousands of domesticated farm chickens, they're let outside, and then in that outdoors, undoubtedly they connect with, let's say geese, for example, or seagulls, for example, who then share space and transmit diseases amongst each other, or particularly bird flu. Touch a slide. Can we go to the next one and then we'll come back to this? Continuing with influenza type A to D viruses, here we have an example at which specific communities or populations of groups infect one another. People labeled at the bottom of the screen can infect dogs and cats with influenza A viruses like H1N1 and H3N2. Whilst people can infect domesticated poultry with the same subtypes, and domesticated poultry can infect people with avian influenza H5 and H7 subtypes. This ongoing exchange of influenza viruses amongst people and domesticated poultry creates opportunities for viral reassortment, specifically when they're not mitigated. Add that wild waterfowl like geese can infect people directly with pretty much different subtypes from subtypes H1 to H16 subtypes. Viral reassortment becomes deeply worrisome. Specifically, the modes of cross-infection that we are speaking to directly are airborne transmission, and yeah, airborne transmission. But you can transmit bird flu like through food as well, or fomite or residue, and also waterborne or contaminated water too. Yeah, can you go back to the wastewater scan, please? Wanted to show this like wastewater scan. It wasn't until recent that, well, yeah, obviously we see COVID is not high in the national level in the United States, which I would say that, this is like a rough estimate. If it's high here, I would usually say that it's very high. So influenza A viruses are very high. And also just noting that influenza B viruses are also really high, and this is as of recent. Again, I think it's interesting because influenza A or influenza viruses, particularly like reassorting amongst each other, and viral reassortment is like one of the main concerns with influenza viruses and growing fears of the next pandemic, for example. But undoubtedly, I will say that even though people, I would say the animals are already experiencing this pandemic of influenza. Okay, the next slide we're going to show is going to be just some signs and symptoms. So you're going to see some animals that are ill from highly pathogenic avian influenza, so just content warning. So some of the signs of infections are bruising and swelling around the head. So in the crown, you will see some bruising or swelling. Sometimes you also see, high mortality rate. So HPAI has a high mortality rate. Discharge from the nose and beak. Bruising around feet. If you have chickens or birds, you might see that they're lethargic or have low energy, and difficult breathing. I think it's really, even though it can live asymptomatically, it's important to learn more about the signs and symptoms of HPAI, specifically because, one, there's lack of testing. So if you have a flock of chickens in your backyard of like 3 to 5 chickens, at least here in Illinois, the state veterinarian will not go out to your flock because you have a small amount of chickens. And yeah, if your chickens are ill, but I would definitely get familiar with like the signs of infections, and also just do more research on what are new symptoms or signs of infections that are coming up in different animals. Yep, that's gonna be one way that we're gonna know how our animals are doing. Yeah, the lack of testing around bird flu and just like backyard growers or everyday people there's a lot of more advocacy that needs to happen there. A lot of more organizing needs to happen there because there's not a direct tie to like state veterinarians coming and out and testing for your flock. Next slide, please. So where and how does it spread? So we're going to talk a little bit about the capitalist manufacturing of disease-making spaces, something that someone in the chat touched upon a little bit earlier. Airborne and foodborne transmission, specifically some articles of some animals and people who have become ill and have passed away due to to bird flu transmission. And then just reasserting concerns at the end. Such a slide. The capitalist manufacturing of disease epicenters or spaces. The industrialization of agriculture has only arrived at the benefit of capitalist gain, like how some of us mentioned in the chat earlier. Migrant farm workers and those who tend to the land and harvest food to distribute are often at health risk due to the terrible working conditions these places place on them. The domestication of animals for food production continues to be a place where zoonotic pathogens are created. The viral exchange between domestic birds, wild birds, and people, plus the production of waste in these ecosystems, plus the lack of biosecurity in these spaces, become a threat to the overall health of our communities. And this quote reads, although not typically recognized as such, industrial food animal production generates unique ecosystems, environments that may facilitate the evolution of zoonotic pathogens and their transmission to human populations. Touch slide. I wanted to show this really dope map of one, just like really interesting to see the major flyways of migratory birds. This is from 2005. And connecting it to H5N1 outbreaks in 2005. And just visualizing how connected these migratory pathways are. And it doesn't show in this map, but there's another map that has this, but has specific crossover areas, or pretty much where you see, like, for example, a black line in the far left, where it says Mississippi America's flyway intersect with the red migratory pattern and the yellow, and the green migratory pattern. Kind of goes to show that birds share and stop at similar spaces and environments, or have similar migratory rest spaces, if you want to call them, showing that that highly pathogenic avian influenza and low pathogenic avian influenza undoubtedly lives amongst bird population, and the crossover zones where multiple bird flyways overlap tells us that they also globally share the environment in the air. Yeah, touch slide, please. This will be in your resource packet. I think it's a really, really cool thing to show. So you can learn, if you want to learn about live migratory migration maps, you'll see where and how birds are moving, when are they moving, what's happening with some real-time data, where are the clusters of specific birds moving. This is called Birdcast. It's an interactive map online that we can use to see some of these migration patterns. Touch the slide. So now we're going to move on to some reported positive cases of bird flu. Content warning, we're going to be talking about people and animals who have passed away. One of the first H5 bird flu death reported in the United States was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, July 6th of 2025, last year in the summer. This patient contracted H5N1 after exposure to a combination of a non-commercial backyard flock, could be like backyard chickens, and wild birds. And what is highlighted here is, this person passed away due to the H5 infection. Outside of the United States, according to this, the World Health Organization, in 2025, more than 950 cases of H5N1 bird flu have been reported, and about half of those have resulted in death. So globally, bird flu does have a high mortality rate. And I think I also wanted to add here, I didn't put it on this in the slide. Actually, hold on. Okay, can you go to the next slide? Thank you, Eddie. I think I also wanted to add that a 40-year-old um, 40-year-old person in Colorado who was doing forced prison labor to call a flock of chickens during a bird flu outbreak. According to this article, this person did not pass away directly, but had some complications and eventually recovered. But it just goes to talk about the relationship between forced prison labor and what people in prisons are mandated to do, and the active exposure they have when it comes to forced labor, and specifically to choline. Choline is a method that people are using in the United States to control bird flu. So, for example, specifically in poultry production, you will see, for example, let's say there's 10,000 birds in a farm, and even if like 1,000 of those 10,000 birds become ill, the protocol is to call all those birds so that, to avoid the spread, because it does spread rapidly. So yeah, calling calls to killing these birds so that the disease doesn't spread. And that's what this person was doing. Next slide, please. Here in Lincoln Park, in Chicago, in the Lincoln Park Zoo, avian influenza caused the death of a harbor seal named Slatter and a Chilean flamingo named Teal. And I'm just gonna read a little bit of what this article says. Lincoln Park Zoo reports that testing has confirmed highly pathogenic avian influenza was the cause of death for a Chilean flamingo on January 8th and a harbor seal on January 9th. The zoo is saddened by the loss of a Chilean flamingo named Teal and a harbor seal named Slatter. Teal hatched this fall and was just getting acquainted with her flock and keepers. Slatter was 7 years old and was a beloved seal known for his rambunctious and curious nature. He was a quick learner and often could be seen participating training in sessions with keepers. Both will be deeply missed. This is sad news for wildlife and for the zoo team. Not only we are facing the first known cases of HPAI in animals in our care, but we lost two amazing animals. It was also said while highly pathogenic avian influenza is a naturally occurring virus that's what it says, naturally occurring virus in free-ranging waterfowl, more mammal species have been reported to be susceptible to HPAI since 2002. Touch a slide, please. Let me see my notes here. As mentioned in the prior slides, influenza A viruses affect cats as well. This report specifically talks about raw food contamination. There's possibility of cats becoming ill from flu with the possibility of death. In fact, barn cats dying at multiple dairies helped veterinarians discover the virus in dairy cattle. Even before then, cats were known to be susceptible to the H5N1 virus, which with several feline cases linked to poultry or wild bird exposure before the virus was first detected in dairy cattle. I will say, yeah, I think so suggested mitigation with house cats in particularly. I know some of us like have taken our cats outside. I think, yeah, I think building our awareness around our environment, like what birds are present, what birds are near, and knowing how airborne disease works is important to like take into consideration of how you will want your house animal to interact with the environment. as we know that bird flu is airborne, COVID is airborne, and both can affect our animals and ourselves alike. Touch the slide, please. Okay, now I'm going to move into a little bit more on some biosecurity, bird flu biosecurity and programs. Specifically going to talk about a letter that was sent to poultry producers in Illinois. Touch the light, please. So this is a letter from the Illinois Department of Agriculture. I just want to clarify, I don't trust state-funded bird flu programs. I'm a big critique of them. I think sometimes these letters do validate the overall urgency of bird flu. And also I like studying them and sharing what these state-based folks are saying these poultry producers to follow. But some of the things that were mentioned in this letter that was marked October 14th of 2025 to all Illinois poultry producers, it was notified that HPAI is still a threat globally, noting that outbreaks in wild waterfowl like geese and domestic poultry continues to be relevant. Some encourage mitigations to all Illinois poultry producers is to move birds indoors to prevent contact with wild birds. Review biosecurity plan and implement the highest level of security as possible. Provide clean water and make sure it's not contaminated by wild birds. And I highlighted this last one that says hazing protocols to discourage wild waterfowl from engaging in premise. It's still unclear to me exactly what these hazing protocols are. I can imagine them being anything from maybe like a firework or some type of noise. So if anybody knows what these hazing protocols might be, please let us know in the chat. But yeah, I'm I'm also curious to know what people think about scaring away wild waterfowl from industrial farm chickens, as other wild waterfowl or wild birds also have a right to the environment that they land on or share space with other farm chickens. Touch a slide, please. The type of biosecurity principle we are uplifting outside of state suggestion is on principle that secures the collective life against risk. In opposition to necrosecurity, which claims that the death of vulnerable populations plays an important role in social welfare and political order. The investment in necrosecurity is where disease is used to call populations and spread disinformation on the actual harm and health consequences of specific diseases. As we said in the people we were saying in the chat earlier, right? Like bird flu specifically, and even COVID, right? Like there's at least state by state, or at least our government is like providing misinformation or not information at all. There's a push for censorship around public health information so that we can make informed consent decisions around how we want to care for ourselves and one another. The biosecurity principle and the zine that we use to define this will also be in your care packages or in your resource packages when we send it out. But yeah, the idea that like biosecurity is the biosecurity secures the collective life against risk is the principle that we're moving with when talking about mitigations. Oh, touch a slide. Some PPE recommendations and when we are talking about the highest level of security, to when we enter a place that there's been an outbreak, for example, of bird flu, or COVID or other airborne diseases. But also we're talking specifically with folks dealing directly with poultry farms, and what the required PPE can and must be for them in order to be safe. And us, people who may not have a direct connection to a poultry farm, can definitely take from these recommendations and adapt them to our everyday life. And yeah, this can be for example, for first responders, hospital staff, farm and dairy workers, to name a few. And we all can learn from this model and apply it to everyday life. So this looks like being covered from all parts of your body. The overalls, you have your N95 respirator or K95 or better, which if I were to, for example, make a bird flu program for a farm, I would suggest I will also connect that to the importance of having a respirator on at all times, even before you enter work or even leave your house. The safety goggles, so that nothing can enter through your eyes. Make sure that the overalls have a hoodie as well, so you can be fully covered from your hair or any other things that you might need for your hair to be covered, whatever that might look like. Disposable gloves. Here it says rubber boots, which are fine. I would just make sure to disinfect them before you unmask. And or if you want to use boot covers or booties to cover your feet, and then dispose of them after. I'm also interested in, like, we've been talking about this with CSAC, how we can like play around with PPE and fashion to kind of like do it ourselves type of thing, like with the things that we have available. Will be really cute to see. Charge slides. Hell yeah. Looking at saying hello to your comment, yeah. So some real uncertain concerns. I don't know how much of you all remember the pandemic from 2009 of the swine influenza virus. Well, we already talked a little bit about what is circulating right now, the influenza viruses that are circulating. The 2009 swine flu virus was caused from a triple reassortment of some sorts with different influenza A viruses like H1N2, H3N2, and it just goes to show how much influenza viruses like to reassort and share information with each other, and is continuing to pose a threat as we see flu-like hospitalizations, the rise of bird flu, and the pandemic of bird flu amongst birds and specifically, definitely of concern and needs to be continued to be monitored and mitigated. Touch a slide, please. Oh, yay.
Now we'll have a 10-minute break. Afterwards, we have some resources that we'll just share. Okay. Before questions, I'm just going to quickly go over some resources. Can everyone see my screen? Just checking. Okay, perfect. Okay, so some resources. As we said before, we hope that this isn't your end of your education on mitigating airborne diseases, but just a step. I have a list of some creators to follow. Here is a non-exhaustive list of some COVID cautious creators who do some super cool things. These are their Instagram handles specifically, but many of them do work outside of Instagram. Clean Air Club is a notable one, and the Sick Times, who is on another slide, is another great one. If anyone has any other examples, we'd love to hear some. Crutches and Spice, I love Amani, who does great content, especially around disability justice. So definitely worth a follow. Little Zoom Writers Room is another creative space that is held, correct me if I'm wrong, also on Sundays?
This is also on Sundays. That's earlier in the day. We have a shared post for the regular calls up on our Instagram if y'all want to.
Yeah.
Zoom Writers Room.
Which is another great space also. Yeah. Next, okay, go beyond this teach-in and continue your learning. I'm just going to run through some. So there's a free zine by Ramona Escayo and Cheyenne Gith. It is by donation. Mathbox can get it for free, or it's $10 to $25. This one's free. About how COVID is a labor issue, highlighting how frontline workers are disproportionately impacted by COVID because capitalism values profit over people. There's a free zine by OPERG Toronto and OPERG Guelph called We Keep Us Safe, COVID, Cops, and Communities. It covers a variety of topics and spotlights multiple creators. There's that for you. This is a donation-based zine by, again, Ramona Escayo and Cheyenne Gith, called Mask Up, We Need You, Palestine Solidarity, COVID-19, and the Struggle for Liberation. It's a fantastic read. It's a 40-page zine about how to be pro-Palestinian is to be COVID safe. I quoted them a few times during this teach-in. Next, donation-based zine by Peace Waters and Demetria Tokonbo, called Long COVID Story Short, about a single Black mom and their struggles with long COVID. It was also an excellent, it was a really great piece. Next is an article by Khalil K. Dennis called Long COVID Advocacy is Incomplete Without Sex Care Workers, that touches on Black queer sex workers' struggles to find community with COVID cautious community, and how, quote, destigmatizing Black queer sex workers makes our movement stronger. It is such a fantastic read, especially on just decentering whiteness from the COVID cautious community. Next is an article by Mia Mingus called You're Not Entitled to Our Death, COVID, Abled Supremacy, and Interdependence, that talks about how interdependence will be a key resource in fighting the ongoing pandemic and society's disposability of disabled folks. Here, just a few more. Oops. Next, a free zine by Hazel New Levant called What's Up with COVID and What Can We Do About It, 2026 edition. This is a great zine. It's free, and it the creator welcomes. Thank you. Welcomes so many like distributions. An article by Estelle Ellison, which I quoted from, called Falling by the Wayside, quoting Fauci. Oh, sorry, I don't know the US people, who specifically said that vulnerable populations will fall by the wayside. That talks about Palestine and COVID and calls out the hypocrisy and fighting one genocide while participating in another. I'm going to say they're all excellent reads, but there really are. Someone had mentioned topics about it, but there's an article by Comrade Dremel called Let Them Eat Plague that focuses on manufacturing consent for the pandemic and capitalism. It's a longer read, but it's definitely worth it. It does mainly talk about how the US manufactured consent, but it does have can be applied to a global context. A YouTube video by Lola Germs called Why is Everyone Getting Sick, which is a crash course on long COVID. It also has great links to other resources, and it's a good starting point for a lot of people who are just wondering why everyone's sick. A website called It Is So Well Done, and it also has great closed captioning. There is a website called longcovidsucks.com. It's a website filled with long COVID stories, as well as an interactive diagram of long COVID symptoms and associated studies. Lastly, a lot of y'all asked about how to talk to your loved ones, and we do hope to hold a space for that. 100% we will be sending all of these resources. I apologize for just spamming them in chat. Here is a great article. It is very long, but it talks about how it's hard to navigate conversations with loved ones about talking about COVID-19. Here it is. Yeah. Next, some people, I guess lastly, many requested we touch on new variants. As new variants aren't necessarily our strong suit, Dr. Michael Horger suggests to check out Instagram user Mike_honey_, who tracks new variants through GI said. Note the majority of Mike Honey's tracking is in the global north. This is a pretty interesting tool to check out lineages though. And it just tracks, as you can see here, it does lineage frequencies, and it tracks the phylogenetic, which sorry, I butchered that, but it's a very interesting website. Now, someone asked, I'm just going to leave it anonymous in case people didn't want their username in the question. Someone asked, would Lyme disease be considered zoonotic? According to LymeDisease.org, it describes it as zoonotic, but someone else in the chat said it was tick-based. It is still being recorded. B, do you know the answer to this?
Yeah, it can be zoonotic, specifically in ticks, and it's also vector borne because the vector being the tick, for example, that can bite or infect a person and eventually being at risk of Lyme disease after being infected by a tick, for example, or a tick bite. And in addition to that, I've been thinking about that too, because there's a bunch of other things that need to be mitigated as somebody who spends times outdoors in the summer, specifically in gardens and stuff like that, or farms. And yeah, so I've been experimenting with obviously being fully covered outside when I'm outdoors, whether that's a long sleeve, a hat, my respirator, making sure that my ankles are covered well. Yeah, so that way when I'm brushing through my corn plants, for example, or other areas in the garden, I can try my best to avoid getting bit, not only by ticks, but also other diseases, also by other creatures like kissing bugs, which last year I've heard that if a kissing bug comes in contact with you, and I think if if it bites you, you can transmit something called Chagas disease.
Thank you, B. Next question. Someone asked, are unions making it a labor issue for basic air protection for workers? I sure hope some are connecting the dots. COVID is a labor issue. Oh yeah. We did have a resource for COVID is a labor issue. It would be nice for more people to connect the dots. As B had mentioned previously and how we've mentioned throughout, capitalism plays a super, super big part in why COVID mitigation or COVID in general has just been denied, or people are in denial because they care more about profits. I believe I had mentioned how, for example, I forget which airline it was, but specifically asked the CDC to lower its guidelines. I think what we can do, because I think people's capacity, I think we're almost getting on 3 hours, is if people are okay with this, for someone in the comments said, HIV/AIDS researchers have pivoted to researching long COVID because of the immune impacts. They have, and they've found some antiviral treatments that treat both HIV and long COVID. I think what we can do, if everyone is okay with it, is we have recorded questions in a separate document, and once our facilitators maybe have a bit of a break, and with the resource package and the recording attached onto the recording or resource package, we will answer questions. Are people okay with that, or are there pressing questions that you would want to address at the moment? Thank you. What nothing? I know I keep saying this, but I want to reiterate how grateful and thankful I am for everyone for taking the time and space to come to our event. We've been so grateful and so happy to facilitate this and have community to share information with and who are, receptive. And thank you so much for having conversations in chat, and just being here is enough. So thank you so much, and thank you beyond. I hope that people will check out further events. Keep us up through socials. I don't know how many people came. I'm assuming through the CSAC social, but I hope to see familiar faces or names or a presence, I guess, in the future. So thank you again. Thank you for all the hearts in the chat. Oh, thank you.
So we're gonna be honest, we're really horrible at saying bye. So we say bye like 10 times before saying bye. But I appreciate everybody for being here.
100%.
Definitely wish to see some of y'all soon, either in the media or in a call. Oh yes, I'm gonna put my Instagram here. Why not? Oh, my Instagram's all over.
Dang, I wish we could end with like a song or something, like a pro-mask anthem. Everybody.
Sadly, not a pro-mask anthem, but this is editing Eddie here. I just wanted to end the video by saying we didn't get to the questions at the end. We were all kind of very tired. But we answer the questions in a resource package that will be linked in the description, as well as how you can contact and keep in touch in the future. Thanks to everyone who came to the event, and thanks to everyone who is here watching. Okay. Toodles.